business. The same Donald Trump who said almost exactly a year ago that price-hiking drug companies were getting away with murder has nominated a drug company executive with a documented history of raising prescription drug prices. Mr. Alex Azar is here with the committee, nominated to serve as the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. It's my view that the issues he'll work on, if confirmed, are going to be defining domestic issues in 2018. That's because the American people heard a lot of promises 2 years ago about how great their health care would be under a President Trump and how the era of skyrocketing drug prices was over. Americans are going to want to know come this November if all those big promises, if all those big pledges they heard in the fall of 2016 actually happened. To say the administration hasn't yet delivered would be a wild understatement. Now, Mr. Azar was the president of Eli Lilly's U.S.-based subsidiary, Lilly USA, from 2012 to 2017. He chaired its U.S. Pricing, Reimbursement, and Access Steering Committee, which gave him a major role over drug price increases for every product Lilly marketed in the United States. Now, Chairman Hatch noted, and I appreciate him doing this because he and I talk about this and focusing on the record, the public record. So our staff's done a fair amount of homework on it, and I want to spend some time looking at the track record. The price of Lilly's bone growth drug Forteo, used to treat osteoporosis, more than doubled on Mr. Azar's watch. The price of Effient, used to treat heart disease, more than doubled. The price of Strattera, used to treat ADHD, more than doubled. The price of Humalog, used to treat diabetes, more than doubled. These are just some of the drugs that were under Mr. Azar's purview as head of Lilly USA. Significantly, Mr. Azar told the committee staff that while he chaired the company's pricing committee, he never, not even once, signed off on a decrease in the price of a drug. Now, this morning, the committee, in my view, is likely to hear from Mr. Azar and colleagues that that's the way things work. It's the system that's at fault. It's the system that ought to be blamed. My view is there's a fair amount of validity in that. The system is broken. Mr. Azar was part of that system. Given ample opportunity to provide specific examples as a nominee of how he'd fix it, Mr. Azar has come up empty. If Mr. Azar is confirmed, it won't be the first time the president and his healthcare team broke their promises. A virtual parade of Trump healthcare officials have come before this committee and the Health Committee and promised to uphold the law with respect to the Affordable Care Act. Right out of the gate, we remember Tom Price telling us it would be his job to administer the law at HHS, not be a legislator. The track record doesn't look so great there because, in effect, on day one, it sure seems that the sabotage policy kicked in. Along with allies in Congress, the Trump team wasted no time undermining private health insurance markets. Emphasize, private health insurance markets. They cut the open enrollment period in half. Advertising budgets were slashed. It became harder for people having difficulty signing up for coverage to get in-person assistance. They attacked a rule that says women have to have guaranteed no-cost access to contraception. Fortunately, that's been a move that's been held up in the courts. And what's been particularly troubling to me, because it goes back to my days when I was director of the Gray Panthers, administration made it easier to sell junk insurance that fails people when they have a healthy emergency. All in all, the Trump administration has made millions of people's health care worse, and there doesn't seem to be a serious plan to undo the damage. Mr. Azar will have to explain today whether he's going to continue that policy. We talked about it in the office yesterday. And he should, because it stands in stark contrast to what Mr. Azar did when he was a member of the Bush administration to help launch Medicare Part D. He was part of a bus roadshow and public events and local media appearances. So when it came to promoting the Medicare prescription drug benefit, which I was one of the Democrats who voted for it, he toured like he was in the Grateful Dead. Now he's set to join an administration that's tweeted less about open enrollment than about Thanksgiving safety. Finally, there's been a lot of talk about welfare reform coming up. Mr. Azar told me he believes Medicaid counts as welfare. But everybody asked seems to have a different answer for what exactly welfare reform means. The common thread to the Republican talk here is pretty obvious. Substantial, draconian cuts to programs that are a lifeline: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, anti-hunger program, support for struggling families. With respect to Medicaid, for millions, this program is at the heart of health care in America, and it spans generations, from newborns to 2 out of 3 older people in nursing homes. Today, Medicaid is built on a guarantee. The Trump team says it wants to end that. Those are public statements. End it. They've set in motion plans that would make it harder for a lot of people to get the care they need. In some cases, it's older people. Sometimes it's folks with disabilities who need long-term care. In other cases, it's adults of limited means, people who struggle to climb the economic ladder. That's kind of my background, so I'm interested in hearing what Mr. Azar has in mind with respect to seniors. To me, risking the Medicaid guarantee, so essential for long-term care for the eligible seniors, I want everybody to know that's a non-starter here. Furthermore, my view is you can't get ahead in life if you don't have your health. So endangering the health of low-income Americans, in my view, is the absolute wrong way to go. So there are going to be other issues that fall under the welfare umbrella. Mr. Azar has no experience in those areas. I'm one who feels that people with business backgrounds, those viewpoints can be welcome, but it's got to be combined with a set of values that are in line with what I believe are the real priorities for the American people. So that's my sense of where we are, and I'd like to wrap up this way, Mr. Chairman. The leaders on both sides of this committee previously had regular meetings and calls with sitting HHS secretaries. I see Mr. Levitt, who went out of his way when he was secretary to have those kinds of meetings, and Sylvia Burwell and a whole host of Democratic secretaries did the same thing. I'd like to just note as we wrap up that in my meeting with Mr. Azar yesterday, he noted that he wasn't going to go along with the last HHS secretary who broke that bipartisan tradition to the detriment of the Senate and, in my view, good policy. And Mr. Azar, without any prompting, said that he was interested in having those kinds of meetings, that he would revive it. So, Mr. Azar, thank you for being here. Thank you for our meeting yesterday, and we look forward to your statement and questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Azar, I'm going to ask some questions about these price issues, and we're going to hold up some charts. And certainly, if you have any questions about the charts that are being used, we welcome your comments. During the 5 years that you were president of Lilly USA, you had direct responsibility for pricing strategies of the biomedicines unit, including the osteoporosis drug Forteo. You also chaired the company's U.S. pricing committee. I'm going to quote from how you described your role as it related to Forteo in a written statement to the committee. You said to the committee, as chairman of the Pricing, Reimbursement, and Access Steering Committee for Lilly USA, and as the relevant profit and loss business unit leader for the biomedicines business unit in the United States, I approved pricing recommendations for this medicine. That is your quote. during your time in these positions, based on the committee's investigative team, the company's annual financial reports showed that Forteo's U.S. revenue increased 58%, reaching $770 million in 2016. Each year, the company told shareholders that revenue increased because Forteo's price went up. You have told the Finance Committee that you were responsible for approving the price of Forteo, so let's look at the prices. This chart that we're holding up shows the wholesale package price of Forteo, and your watch is the red line where the price is just going up and up and up. The blue line, as I indicated, is the price before you became president. The red line is the price while you were president. The price more than doubled on your watch from a little more than $1,000 to more than $2,700. That's a 164% increase in 5 years. The Wall Street Journal recently showed how these price effects affected consumers when the paper did a profile of one older person who was on Medicare, who paid $5,600 of her own money to buy Forteo after she broke her back. Now, Mr. Azar, this certainly indicates the wholesale price for Forteo in the United States, in fact, more than doubled on your watch. Yes or no?
I believe that data is directionally correct. I don't have the actual pricing information, but I believe that's correct.
Okay. Let me take a look now at Strattera. This is another drug under your purview, which is used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This chart shows how the price of the drug changed over the years. Again, the price before you became president is blue. The price while you were president was red. This is another big jump in pricing that began shortly, based on our investigations, after you became president. If these were isolated incidents, it could be written off, in my view, as an anomaly. It seems like people have gotten hurt, but it'd be an anomaly. But the company's annual financial reports show that during your time, Lilly's U.S. Pricing Committee, when you ran that, higher prices drove U.S. revenue for drug after drug after drug, even when demand for the products fell. So one more question in this line of questioning. As chairman of the U.S. Pricing Committee for this company, did you ever lower the price, ever, of a Lilly drug sold in the United States?
Drug prices are too high, Mr. Senator Wyden. I've said that. I said that when I was at Lilly. And
Azar,
every incentive
that is not the question.
Yep,
did you ever lower the price? That is
I don't know that there is any drug price of a branded product that has ever gone down from any company on any drug in the United States, because every incentive in this system is towards higher prices, and that is where we can do things together, working as the government to get at this. No one company is going to fix that system. That's why I want to be here working with you.
Let the record show that when that specific question for Mr. Azar was asked, when the bipartisan Senate Finance Committee was present, did he ever lower the price of a Lilly drug sold in the United States? Mr. Azar said no. And let the record show that that is what we were told, and now we're going to have to make some judgments about how you're going to approach the issues of helping to shrink pharmacy receipts. You and I talked about legislation that I've introduced, that would ensure that the consumer got the price reduction at the window I've introduced that legislation, so we're probably going to ask whether you're going to urge the president to support it.
Your time is up, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll have questions on the second round. Thank you.
Okay, Senator.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions, but I want to make two unanimous consent requests, if I might, to put documents into the record at this point, because I think Mr. Azar has, in response to colleagues, given incorrect answers. Senator Nelson, for example, asked whether he was supportive of the president's position with respect to these issues, Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. Mr. Azar said that the president promised he wouldn't cut it, and he has adhered to that promise. That is simply untrue. The president's first budget proposed cutting Medicaid by hundreds of billions of dollars through proposals like block grants. So I'd like to put the budget into the record, not the entire budget, Mr. Chairman, but the part that indicates the answer to Senator Nelson's question was incorrect. Also, we've just gotten information that...
We'll be happy to do that, but we should let Mr. Azar respond to that.
Well, this is just
a response.
This is just a request to put information into the record.
Your earlier statement, I wonder if he has any comment about that.
I think this has to do with Washington speak, that slowing the rate of growth of a growing program is simply not a cut in my mind or the president's mind.
Well, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, and the state Medicaid directors point blank said no flexibility is going to make up for the fact we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cuts. I also may ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, that we put into the record documents from the Pew Trust and global data that certainly suggests that the answer to Senator McCaskill with respect to advertising and R&D was incorrect, because in 2013, according to these documents, Lilly spent $5.7 billion on sales and marketing and $5.5 billion on R&D, and he said that these budgets were not remotely close to each other. So I would
without objection,
like those placed in the record. Let me now, if I could just...
Mr. Chairman, I would clarify. The senator's question was the advertising budget, which was about direct-to-consumer, and there is no way that was even remotely close to $5 billion at Lilly, not overall sales, general administrative expenses. I don't have the balance sheets of Lilly in front of me, so I can't speak to that, but I know there is no conceivable way any advertising budget at Eli Lilly was remotely close to the R&D spending.
Well, we'll let people evaluate that data. You said the two were far apart. That's certainly not what the document suggests. Let me go to my two questions quickly, and I appreciate the chairman's thoughtfulness. Mr. Azar, weeks before at the Help Committee, you said that you supported proposals that would wipe out the Medicaid guarantee for our senior citizens. This is the guarantee that picks up the tab for 2 out of 3 older people in nursing homes, 4,000 seniors in Oregon each day, and you would wipe out that guarantee by folding Medicaid into a block grant. I'd like to know whether you still support walking back the Medicaid guarantee for these older people, and again, as I indicated, the nonpartisan Medicaid directors stated, and I quote, "No amount of flexibility," their words, not mine, are going to compensate for those type of cuts. Would you like to walk back your earlier position with respect to that commitment to older people who fought the wars, did everything right, that they're still going to have a guarantee of nursing home coverage?
I believe what we talked about at the Help Committee hearing was around the fact that block granting, that I can find a lot of appeal in block granting now, as I've said before, I said there and I think I've said here, which is the devil's in the details on how one structures the notion of any type of block grant, both in terms of the dollar amounts and then what strings from the federal government are attached to it in terms of who needs to be covered, who's eligible but not necessary to cover. That all would need to be worked out in legislation, which we're certainly far from.
Why don't you amplify for the record, and because of the chairman's courtesy, I'm going to do this last one very, very quickly. It looks to me like you still want a block grant which the state Medicaid directors say no amount of flexibility is going to be able to compensate for those cuts. My last question we haven't talked about, and that's Title 4A of Social Security. This is, of course, what people know as welfare. AFDC, a hugely important program to help families escape poverty and find work. Right now, it looks to me like the measure of success, the major measure for success is reducing the caseloads at that program. I'd like a different measure and would like to see if you'd work with us on it. I'd like the measure of success to be finding jobs for people so you can get out of poverty. So the question is, that's not the measure today. Would you work with Democrats and Republicans to change the measure, to actually change the program so that the measure is not reducing caseloads, but it is having people find work to get out of poverty? That's a yes or no.
Absolutely.
Thank you.